Hey everyone, welcome back or welcome to my channel if you're new here. So today's video is part 2 of the Kathleen Folbigg series. Sorry it's taken so long to get this out. I promise with part 3 I will be much quicker. Things have just been really busy here, but I promise more videos are coming, and I actually have a very highly requested missing persons case coming this week, so stay tuned for that. I also wanted to mention the book Kathleen Folbigg, Australia's Worst Female Serial Killer again, even though I mentioned it in the last video. It was a really great book and I highly recommend it for all of you true crime fans out there, and it's also where I got most of my research, so thank you so much Matthew Benz for all of your hard work. Now with all of that being said, let's just get into the regular disclaimer. So I report on very public news that anyone has access to. All of the opinions expressed are my own unless stated otherwise, and all of my sources are linked down below as always. Now let's get into it. So we just left off on part 1 with Kathy letting Craig know that she wanted to try to have another baby. Now expectedly, Craig was very hesitant about this. He had just gone through a lot of heartbreak and losing his children, and he really didn't want to go through that heartbreak again. However, Kathy told him that if he wouldn't agree to have another child, she would leave him. So out of fear of losing both the child and his wife, Craig hesitantly agreed to try for another child. What made Craig feel better about this decision to have another baby was that him and Kathy actually met with many SIDS experts and gathered as much information as possible. These experts actually agreed to give them a sleep apnea mat, which they would put on their baby once they're born at night when they're sleeping, and this mat would sound a loud alarm anytime the baby stopped breathing, so that the parents could go in and get to the baby before anything tragic happened. So with all of this preparation ready, Sarah Folbigg was born on October 14th, 1992. Sarah Folbigg was born as a beautiful and healthy baby girl, and the family was able to take her home fairly quickly. However, things started to go downhill very quickly at the Folbigg household, as the sleep apnea mat turned out to be a big problem within the family. This mat would sometimes go off all night and for really no reason at all, and since Kathy was the one who was easily awoken and Craig was a sound sleeper, she was the one who was having to check on the baby throughout the night, and she was starting to get really irritable due to the lack of sleep. So in order to cope with this stress, Kathy told Craig that she wanted to start working again so she could get out of the house and have some kind of outlet, so she began working at a place called Baby Co. on the weekends. However, this was really just an excuse for Kathy to leave the baby at home and really not have to deal with it, as she was starting to get really frustrated with Sarah. Even with Kathy having this new outlet, things were still starting to crumble at the Folbigg household. Sarah wasn't getting any better at sleeping throughout the night, and Craig took a job over an hour away in Singleton at a new car dealership, meaning with the commute, he was away from home more than ever, and the two's relationship began to crumble very quickly. They were arguing all the time and really just not getting along. Despite all of this turmoil, the night of August 29th, 1993, when Sarah was 10 months old, appeared to be just a regular night in the Folbigg household. The family had spent the day at the beach, and when they got home, Sarah, like most babies, really didn't want to go to bed, and Kathy was getting very frustrated. Craig heard Kathy yelling at the baby and spanking her, and he rushed in the room to stop this. He took the baby from Kathy very quickly and comforted her as she was crying due to her mom yelling at her, as many kids would do if someone got aggressive towards them. And he held her until she fell asleep while watching TV and eventually put her back into bed at 11 p.m. and then went to bed himself. It's important to mention here that the family had decided to stop using the sleep apnea monitor at this point, because like I said, it was giving them a lot of trouble and keeping them up throughout the night, as well as Sarah was old enough, she had passed the age where she was a risk for SIDS, and so doctors really didn't think there was a risk anymore, so they said that it was okay to stop using it. This meant that if something happened to Sarah throughout the night, there would be no way of the family knowing of this. This decision would actually end up to be a very horrible one. Now back to the night in question. So after Craig put the baby to bed and went to bed himself, he actually woke up in the middle of the night to find that Kathy wasn't next to him and that Sarah's light in her room was on. which he kind of found strange considering, Kathy was in Sarah's room in the middle of the night for a long period of time. But he, just chalked it up to maybe the baby woke up in the middle of the night and Kathy had to calm her down, or, Kathy was feeding her or changing her diaper. So he didn't think much of it and he decided to go back to bed. Just moments later, however, all kinds of chaos ensued. Craig woke up to Kathy screaming for him and he ran into Sarah's room. She seemed limp and he tried to grab her, but her body was pretty much lifeless at this point. He tried to do CPR on her, but he hadn't gotten proper training, even after all of the past events where it would have come in handy. And so Kathy called the ambulance and it actually arrived very quickly, just 6 minutes later. But unfortunately, they were unable to do anything for baby Sarah, and she passed away just moments after the ambulance arrived. Both parents appeared to be devastated after Sarah's passing. However, detectives still had to do their job and interviewed the couple immediately. Kathy gave very little information and told them just the same story that she had told everyone else. She claims that she had woken up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom when she decided to check on Sarah out of chance and noticed that she wasn't moving or breathing, which is when she called the Craig. However, this story doesn't fit with the series of events that Craig remembers. He specifically remembers waking up that night and seeing Kathy in Sarah's room for a long period of time before any of this happened. Although this detail would go on to be very important in the case, it was largely ignored at this moment. The post-mortem didn't uncover anything new about this case, and really nothing was out of the ordinary on baby Sarah except for 2 puncture marks on her face as well as a displaced uvula, which they said could have been due to the ambulance trying to give her CPR or resuscitate her. So it was just chalked up to a tragic accident and it was declared a passing due to SIDS. Now, something about this really wasn't sitting right with Craig. Kathy's story wasn't adding up, and every time he pressed her about this or confronted her, she changed the subject and really didn't want to talk about it. But he was so into her charm and he was so in love with her that he really didn't press this any further and just kind of let it go. In the aftermath of Sarah's passing, the couple's relationship was just getting worse. They were constantly moving around from Thornton to Singleton to back to Thornton and then to Glendale in a house. Now, along with the living arrangements being chaotic, so was their relationship. They were constantly breaking up and getting back together and fighting, and things were not good between them. And in 1995, Kathy gave Craig an ultimatum. She said if he didn't move on from his grief and start to act normal again, that she would leave him. And because he wasn't able to pull himself out of the grief of losing his children, she ended up moving out into her own house in Newcastle. Now, while Craig was very depressed at losing his children, as you would expect someone to be, Kathy was living it up and acting as if her kids had never passed away. She was going to the gym every day, basically obsessed with losing weight, as her friends said, and going out every night, drinking and partying, and just kind of living it up, without any memory that the children ever existed. Although Kathy seemed to be living her best life, something brought her back to Craig. As I said, their relationship was very turbulent, so it's no surprise that they would reconcile, as they pretty much always did. Craig got a new job when he got back together with Kathy, and they ended up buying a huge house and their dream home in Singleton. And things were actually going well for the couple for a while, until 1996, when Kathy told Craig that she wanted to try to have another baby. Craig immediately dismissed this idea because so many bad things had come from them having children, and he really couldn't live through that depression and grief again. However, like with the other children, Kathy kept pushing the idea and would not let it go until Craig agreed to it. However, in Kathy's mind, having this new baby was a great idea, and she pretty much convinced herself that the same thing wouldn't happen to this new baby as had to the other children. She wrote about this in her diary on June 18th, 1996, saying that, "I'm ready this time, and I know I'll have help and support this time. When I think I'm going to lose control like last time, I'll just hand baby over to someone else. Not feel totally alone. Getting back into my exercise after will help my state of mind and sleeping whenever possible as well. I've learned my lesson this time." These diary entries raise all kinds of red flags and are very suspicious. Talking about losing control and that she'd learned her lesson does not sound like the result of an accident. Again, these diaries were just a place where Kathy went to vent, but eventually in this case, they would go on to reveal a lot about what happened to the Folbigg children. On August 7th, 1997, Laura Folbigg was born. Craig was thrilled to finally be a father again, and Laura seemed to be perfectly healthy. However, the couple decided to take the baby to a bunch of specialists just to get tests done to make sure that the baby was healthy, as they suspected that there was something wrong with their siblings to make them pass, and they wanted to make sure that this wasn't the case with baby Laura. They were also taught at these specialists how to do CPR, which was something that they had needed to know with their other children, so they were really happy to learn this and put in some precautions to make sure that Laura would be safe. Additionally, these specialists gave the family an electronic corometrics monitor, which would monitor the breathing and heartbeat of the baby. Now, the parents were supposed to record these details and then send it to the hospital weekly so that they could interpret these details and make sure that the baby was healthy. This would ensure that there was nothing going undetected and that there was nothing wrong with baby Laura. So with this new monitor as a safeguard, the Folbiggs were feeling very well about Laura's safety, and every time it would go off, Kathy would go in to make sure that the baby was okay. However, little did Craig know that this monitor was keeping the baby safe in more ways than one, as Kathy wrote in her journal on August 25th, 1997 that, "Scary feelings. I've realized I actually love her and have bonded with her, wish to protect her, etc. Maternal instinct is what they call it. I now know I never had it with the others. Monitor is a good idea. Nothing can happen without the monitor knowing, and since I'm not game enough to not plug it in because they'd want to know why I hadn't, everything will be fine this time." Kathy also wrote about her feelings about Laura in her journal. She seemed to favor her over her other children and was more patient towards her and had less angry outbursts towards her. She wrote about this in her journal on October 25th, 1997, saying, "Just watched video of Sarah. Little upsetting, but she did some funny things. Made us laugh. Think John, Craig's brother, was a little upset, but he hid it well. I looked at it, but I have to be honest and say I cherish Laura more. I miss her, yes, but I'm not sad that Laura is here and she isn't. Is that a bad way to think? Don't know. Think I am more patient with Laura. I take the time to figure out what is wrong now instead of just snapping my cog. Also, she is a far more agreeable child and is easy most of the time." She concludes her journal entry by saying, "Wouldn't have handled another one like Sarah. She saved her life by being different." These entries are very ominous and foreboding and are honestly kind of hard to read. It's really disturbing how Kathy talks about Laura and says that she really isn't upset that Sarah passed. It really makes you think, she said that by being different, it saved Laura's life. However, if it really was a tragic accident, how would being different save someone's life from SIDS? It really doesn't make sense, and these entries really poke holes in Kathy's story. Things began to be tense again with the couple as Kathy was getting restless with her life as a mother. She wrote in her journal about how she would take out her anger on baby Laura and scream at her and almost purposely dropped her, which is very disturbing. She also took out a lot of her anger on Craig, and she seemed to be a ticking time bomb, which was a pattern with her. She really had anger problems and was out of control. However, there was some happiness in the Folbigg household when Laura made it to her first birthday, which was a milestone that none of her siblings had made it to. This was a big cause for celebration, and the Folbiggs invited over all kinds of family and friends to celebrate baby Laura. She appeared to be perfectly healthy and rarely made a fuss, which made her a very lovable child. The family was also happy because after turning 1, the threat of SIDS was almost non-existent. Kids over the age of 1 rarely died of SIDS, and so the family was very happy and celebratory that this was no longer an issue that they really had to think about. So the doctors with this said that they no longer needed to use the sleep monitor. However, they continued to use it just to be safe until December of 1998 when they returned it. With this, Craig felt that a cloud had finally been lifted and he could finally just enjoy his time with his baby. Although things with baby Laura were going well, Kathy was a ticking time bomb just waiting to go off. She was going out with her friends almost every night and was very irritable towards Craig and the baby. Her and Craig were on the brink of breaking up so many times, but somehow they managed to salvage their relationship and stay together. Despite all of these things, Craig was still deeply in love with Kathy. It was his tragic flaw that no matter how poorly she treated him and the baby, he seemed to turn a blind eye to these things and really couldn't bring himself to break up with her or leave her or even really call her out on her behavior. Kathy's temper was only getting worse, and when Laura was 19 months old and Craig was at work one Saturday afternoon, she lost her temper with Laura. She was following her around and calling for her and kind of throwing a fit, and Kathy lost it and screamed at her and knocked her over onto the floor. She claims that it was just an accident. However, this was just a taste of what was about to come. On March 1st, 1999, Kathy woke the baby up so that she could eat breakfast with Craig before he went to work like usual. However, Laura didn't want to eat that morning, and Kathy lost her temper with her, screaming at her and causing the poor baby to cry. Craig grabbed the baby and soothed her and calmed her down, and by the time he left for work that day, everything seemed normal to him. At 9 a.m. that same morning, Kathy took the baby with her to Bodyflex Gym in Singleton, and the baby went to childcare while Kathy went to work out. After this workout, her and the baby went to Teasdale's car dealership to say hi to Craig where he worked and, just have a nice little afternoon chat. After hanging out for a while and enjoying each other's company, she said that she needed to bring the baby home for a nap and left. Unfortunately, things were about to take a very dark and unpredicted turn. Craig was on the phone for about half an hour after his daughter and wife left, but a coworker ran into his office frantically and told him that he needed to get to the hospital. So Craig left work and rushed there as quickly as possible. Sadly, by the time that Craig got to the hospital, baby Laura had already passed away. Craig, still in shock, obviously had a lot of questions for Kathy about what had happened that day. She claimed that Laura fell asleep in the car on the way home from Craig's office, and that when they got home, she put Laura to bed immediately. She says she brought the monitor connecting to Laura's room with her outside while she tended to the dog and the laundry, and pretty much just kept an eye on her through the monitor to make sure that everything was okay. She then said that she heard some weird noises coming from the monitor that connected to Laura's room, but really didn't think much of it and continued on with her work outside. After a while, she did decide to go in and check on the baby, but when she did, she noticed that Laura was blue and not breathing, and she tried to give her CPR and call an ambulance, but it was unfortunately too late. Both parents appeared to be devastated until they got home that day, when things began to get really strange. Craig noticed that the baby's sandals were actually on the futon and not outside of her room, as Kathy had claimed she had put them. Also, the monitor that Kathy said she had been listening to the baby to outside was still plugged into the living room where he had left it that morning. All of these things were really strange and not adding up to Craig. Craig also found it very strange that immediately after Laura's passing, Kathy was very quick to get rid of all of her belongings and all of her photos. It was as if this baby never existed, and Kathy rarely even brought her up. However, Craig really had no energy to think about this as he was so deep in his grief. But Craig wasn't the only one who was starting to get suspicious. Detective Bernie Ryan was assigned to the case, and he looked into it immediately, questioning Kathy as soon as he possibly could. She gave him the same story that she had given Craig about the day and really didn't change any of the details. Detective Ryan was particularly invested in this case, especially so because he had 2 children of his own who were around the same age as Laura, so he really sympathized with the family. He was especially sympathetic after finding out from Craig that the couple had had 3 other children who had also passed. He found out from Craig that Caleb and Sarah had passed from SIDS and that Patrick had passed due to epilepsy. After talking to the family, he was quick to go to the house to make sure that he got as many pictures so that he could corroborate the story as best as he could. He noticed right away that the sandals and the monitor were in places that Kathy had said that they wouldn't be, which was something that Craig himself had also noticed. This really raised flags in Detective Ryan's head. On the outside, however, nothing really seemed to be that suspicious, as Craig and Kathy were grieving parents and seemed to be devastated. Kathy was so upset that her foster sister Leah had to come to comfort her during this time. Even though at first Leah noticed how upset Kathy was, things started to get really weird very quickly. Right after the funeral, the same day actually, Kathy made a strange remark that would sit very weirdly with Leah. Right after the funeral, she said to her, "Thank F word, that's over. Now I can move on with my life," which is something that a grieving parent would really not say. I know that people grieve differently, but this seems very insensitive and seems as if, Kathy just wanted to move on with her life as if this never happened. Also, Leah noticed that Kathy loved the attention she was getting from everyone due to a child passing away. She seemed to love being the center of attention, which felt really strange to them. Things kept getting stranger as only days after Laura passed, Kathy was carrying on as if nothing had happened. She was going to the gym, she was back at work, and she was going out with friends almost every night. Craig found this to be really strange as he was still very upset over what had happened. And just 3 weeks after Laura's passing, Kathy told Craig that he needed to stop moping or that she would leave him. This is very callous and uncaring, as this was a very tragic event and Craig was obviously still grieving. No one who really truly cares about someone would say something so cruel and insensitive to the person that they supposedly love. Kathy also refused to talk about the children, and anytime Craig brought them up or wanted to talk about Laura's passing, she immediately changed the subject and said she didn't want to talk about it. However, even though she was being insensitive, Craig still loved her and wanted to make the relationship work. He had just lost a child and didn't want to lose his wife, so in a last-ditch effort to keep the relationship together, the couple decided to visit Kathy's sister Leah in Melbourne to reinvigorate the relationship. However, even this trip couldn't fix Craig's depression, and he was still really struggling. So when they got back from Melbourne, the two split for good, and just 6 weeks after Laura's passing, Kathy and Craig broke up for good and she moved out on her own. Kathy told Craig that he was weighing her down, and this seems very insensitive. However, Craig did his best to move on, although he was heartbroken, and really tried to carry on with life as best as he could. So in May of 1999, he decided to clean the house of all of Kathy's belongings in order not to open painful wounds and to move on with his life. However, little did he know that this decision would change the course of events forever. While cleaning, Craig stumbled upon the diary that Kathy had kept throughout their marriage and throughout the lives of their children, and out of curiosity, he decided to read it. Little did he know that this action would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. But that's all I have for you guys today. I'm going to do a part 3 that will be the last in this series. I hope that you guys are enjoying it, and if you are, please leave a comment or a like, and please subscribe to this channel to find more true crime videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!